Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our webinar today on Monday, 11 in the morning on the 16th of September. For those that don't know me, my name is Ludwig Treviranus. I'm a pianist, I'm a composer, I'm a teacher, and I work at the music edtech company Oclef in San Jose, but I'm based in New Zealand. So I was talking with a colleague of mine that, you're getting older when students who've started learning from you when they were just kids are starting to actually knock on your door asking, "Excuse me, sir, could you please be my reference for college application?" And so we started further talking about how we can best leverage these students and their piano achievements for the college application so they can, really truly stand out. And we decided we needed to speak to somebody who really specializes in this college application process. So upon research, we discover Mr. Thomas Caleel. So a couple of weeks ago, I messaged Thomas to see if he'd like to join me in this webinar, to explore this topic of how to best position our piano students for college admissions in any major. And the man said, yes, he'd be happy to help. So Thomas is the former director of MBA admissions and financial aid at the Wharton School of Business, where he also serves as the dean on the Dean's Globalization Committee and the Graduate Executive Board. He's the chairman and founding CEO of Global Education Opportunities, advising heads of state, corporations, and schools on education projects across the US, Asia, and the Middle East. Thomas also holds an MBA in finance from Wharton and a BA from the University of Pennsylvania, and continues to support his alma mater, the Taft School, as an alumni advisor. But above all, he has a passion for helping people showcase their best self and find their most genuine voice when applying for college admission. So Thomas, we're thrilled to welcome you today, and thank you for joining us. Thank you so much.
Ludwig, I appreciate the invitation. I love talking to people from around the world and helping them demystify this crazy process. I'm glad that you didn't include the fact that, like many people, I took piano lessons for years as a child, and disappoint myself every time I get near a piano these days. So might have to come over to Oclef and try and relearn what I've forgotten.
Oh, you're gonna have to come join us sometime. All right, we've got a lot of piano teachers here,
Perfect.
ready to come and
Perfect.
share their thoughts. And so speaking of which, welcome to all our piano teachers. Thank you so much for joining on in. After our talk with Thomas, we will open up the floor to a Q&A. But if you'd rather type your questions, that's no problem at all. You can just direct them to me and I'll be happy to share them. So let's just get straight into it. Before we dive into some more detailed questions there, Thomas, would you
Sure.
please share with us, first of all, why helping students and families with the college admissions process is important to you, and why you agreed to share your precious time with our piano community?
Of course, like many things in life, it was not a linear or planned path. So my first part of my career, I started off as an entrepreneur and venture investor. I was starting companies, building them, selling them, taking them public, and loved it. And had an opportunity, spoke with the dean of the Wharton School. He gave me a call and said, "Hey, we'd like you to come back and run MBA admissions and financial aid for a few years and help us kind of think about the process and see what we can do to change it, put that entrepreneurial mindset to work." And during the 3 years that I was there, I discovered I really loved this. I loved working with bright young people from around the world. I liked the strategy of it. I liked the satisfaction of it. There's nothing better than getting in and helping people kind of realize their vision and their path and help them get there, even if it wasn't going to Wharton. And so when I left, I started Global Education Opportunities and have been working now for about, I guess, 17 years, since 2008, to work with families on their education plans. And it's broadened. We work with students now who are applying to highly selective boarding schools, prep schools, undergraduate programs, and graduate programs. And to me, we do a lot of pro bono work. We work with a lot of underprivileged students from around the world. We do big national kind of government projects, and the idea of having an impact, for the next 30, 40, 50 years as these students graduate and get educated and go out and bring their change to the world is something that's deeply satisfying and meaningful to me.
I love that. I love it's really difficult to um, try to figure out guidance for this next step in higher education.
Hmm.
To have a company and to have an organization that is willing to do this with heart and with passion is a huge benefit to all of us, especially us artists. Um, Trying
Yes.
to figure out the best words to put your best foot forward is a challenge. My question to you is, has it been a positive response over the last couple of years with the work that you've been doing? What kind of success have you managed to find in working with these students from across the globe?
Well, I've been very fortunate in that I've been able to work with some truly extraordinary uh, young people from around the world. We've got some of them now who are very high levels of government in different countries who are actually helping set and change policy on a wide variety of portfolios. I've helped artists transition to a more academic role in life. Um, and I think to me, one of the most interesting things that we've done is be able to get online. And I came very late to that party. I resisted it for a while. But now being able to reach so many people and kind of share, I take a fairly blunt approach. I know you've seen some of my social media, you've listened to some of my podcasts. I don't believe in sugarcoating things.
Right,
I'm not trying to sell anything. It's really, here's the truth as I know it, having been on the other side of the desk. It's a hard truth for a lot of people, right, to hear sometimes. And it's compounded by the fact that admissions is very complex, and when you're doing highly selective admissions, a lot of people think that you're taking the best, and I put that term in quotes, the best students. But the reality is that when you are highly selective, when you're Harvard or Stanford or Wharton or Yale, you have the opportunity to build whatever class you want because you're getting tens of thousands of applications from exceptional human beings, most of whom could come to your university and do really well, right?
right.
And so the question is, how do you look at that and say, okay, how are we building an interesting class, a diverse class, a class that will go on and leave their impact on the world? Right. And there are so many different variables that go into that. So academics, extracurricular activities, self-awareness, intended field of study, all of those things. So you're really kind of pulling together the people that you want for that class. And that's very frustrating when you're on the other side, right? Because maybe your student or your child or yourself, you've done everything right,
Mm.
right? And you're still not successful in that process. And what I would tell people is that it's not a condemnation of what you've done, right? So everybody thinks that when you're in admissions that the best day is decision day because you get to go out and tell all this 1,000 or 1,500 exceptional young people, hey, congratulations, we want you here studying with us. The reality is that it's probably the saddest day because you're thinking about the tens of thousands of amazing students that you bonded with in this process that didn't make that final cut through no fault of their own. It's also something that changes all the time. And so, what works one year might not work another year just because the school is looking for different things or they're trying to rebalance something. So, there is an element of luck, but as with all luck, there's also a strong element of preparation.
Yeah, yeah. I like this idea that these colleges are also looking not just for the academic excellence or the sport excellence, but people that are interesting and
Mhm.
diverse, as you say. And being in this crowd today with many of our piano teachers, I'd like to talk to you about our first question, which is really taking these skills, these musical achievements, and figuring out a way to translate them into this academic language. Because we
Mhm.
know with our coaches and our musicians, this industry requires discipline, creativity, and time management and teamwork. So, what would you say to our teachers when they're having these students in the college application? How can a pianist best translate their musical accomplishments so they highlight these kind of values that the college, um, these skills?
Of course. And first of all, welcome to all the teachers here and my sincere thanks. I was never smart enough or patient enough to be a teacher. So you have my utmost respect for what you do. And I think that to ask, to answer your question, how do we take something like, uh, music, and this, we're talking about piano here, but how do we take a discipline and a skill and a passion and put it into the application, right? And so I think the first thing that we need to do, and this is always very hard, is kind of a critical sense of self-awareness. And when I meet people and they say, "Oh, my son or daughter is really exceptional and they do all these great things and they have good grades and they're a really good dancer," right? Or good, let's say good pianist. So I say, "Great. Good is a subjective term, right? Or more objective term. Tell me what you mean. Give me their exact grades. When you say that they're a good, they play the piano very well, have they competed internationally? Have they won international contests, national contests, local contests, regional contests? Are they being recruited to a university? Are they applying to a school like Oberlin or the Curtis Institute where music is the sole function? Or is music an aspect of their kind of diversity, personality, and profile? Because those are two very different conversations, right? So if you're applying to a conservatory or a school that is deeply kind of ingrained with the arts, then that's a very different process, right? And I think as teachers, which of your students have the ability to perform at that level and which students are good or passionate piano players, right? And it's one is not a negative or a positive. It's really just separating them at that point, right? Because we're going to take two different approaches. So if you're applying as, let's say, an internationally competitive pianist, then it's a little bit different because then you're kind of using your accomplishments that are widely recognized as part of your kind of framework of excellence, right? And you're saying, I am world class at this. You're probably doing an audition tape that you're submitting through the school's website. You might even be applying as a music major or music theory major, or if you're applying, to schools like Oberlin, Curtis Institute, schools that are absolutely focused on this and they have their own process, right? But I would imagine that that's probably a very, very small percentage of your students because it's a small percentage of the global musician population in any case, right? I would say the bulk of your students, I'm guessing, are good, right? They're good. They enjoy the piano, and it's something music is very special to them. And so in that case, what we really need to do now is we need to avoid cliche. And this is really, really important, right? Is music important to you? Great. Is there creativity, time management, and all of those things involved? Absolutely. But when you think about the fact that last year there were 1.2 million unique common application users, right? That's a lot of stories. And when you guess, even if there's 10% of them, right, that play the piano, it's what 120,000 applicants who play the piano or some form of music. And so what you need to do is go beyond that really kind of surface level, oh, it requires discipline and time management and everything else. And what we want to do is think about, okay, why is music meaningful to you? Of all the things that you could think of to do, why music? Why music? Why piano? Right? And when we think about piano, what kind of music do you like to play? Right? Why is that style of music meaningful to you? What else do you do with the piano? Are you in a band? Do you write music? Right? Are you performing? Do you have a YouTube or an Instagram channel, presence where you're performing for other people? Do you perform in public? It's separating that I love music and it's meaningful to me, which is going to be tens of thousands of other applicants, to this is an integral part of who I am. And then taking it out of the immediate, right? And how do those skills resonate across other areas of your life, right? how do they drive you to make the decisions that you're making in terms of your major, right? I love piano. I've been playing piano for the past 13 years. It's something I do every day. I love it. Um, but I'm interested now more in, as I go forward in my academic career, I'm interested in finance, but I'm just picking something out of the blue, right? Or something that some people would think is unrelated. Well, you talk about the underlying mathematical framework of music and how you see music in that way, and how you've used the discipline to or reorganize this club and do other things in your life. So I hope that's making sense, but it's really important to pull back and really extract the core underlying values, and then the lessons that you've learned and how you're applying them in other areas of your life.
I like that idea that you go directly to how the skills from learning piano can be transferred and have benefited other parts of life. And then secondly, of actually being more genuine and making it meaningful. Because it's quite easy, as you say, to be cliche and to
Mhm.
state the teamwork and the discipline, which we all know. But what I love about your blogs is you do talk about this genuine voice and a real voice
Yes.
so that people can actually see, okay, so you haven't cut and pasted the values, but this is actually what is very clear to you and what has worked. That's really good to know. That actually makes the process much easier rather than having to dig around
Yeah.
because it comes from an honest place. One of the other
Well,
things,
and
yeah,
oh, I'm sorry.
go
Go ahead.
ahead, go ahead.
No, but to use a very imprecise and clunky metaphor, it's, as piano teachers, you probably, you've given your students, let's say, a complex piece of music, right? And there's that point where they master it technically and they're playing it and it's technically correct, but then they get to the point where they know it and they're invested in it, and then their true self comes out with the subtleties of how they're playing it, right? And that's what we're looking for. We're looking for that authentic, because when you, as an admissions director, I've read now probably hundreds of thousands of essays. And it's very clear the students who have done the work up front, who really understand what they're trying to do and the message they're trying to convey, and they write cleanly and clearly and simply, but powerfully. And that person comes off the page and you resonate with them and you say, okay, look, I may not agree with what they're doing, right? I may be so traumatized by my mother making me play the piano that I hate the piano, but I I I understand where they're coming from. I get I respect their voice, and you're going to be far more successful.
I love that idea. One of the things that we also understand through this when we're talking about the values is showcasing that long-term commitment. And
Yes.
talking with my colleague, and he was saying, it's interesting. We do live in this world now of AI, which is becoming a very active partner in our day-to-day living. It's in our work,
Yes.
it's in our research. It's where we go to when we need to figure out a delicious place to go to for dinner with our family.
Hmm.
So it's a tool that can really allow you to guide, or at least guide you to solve problems instantly.
Right.
However, no matter how hard I try to learn the cello in 2 days, AI is not going to
Ah,
solve it. We
no.
both know, Thomas, right? We both know.
Exactly.
Right? We
Exactly.
just call it quits. So then, what have you seen as some effective ways for our students to demonstrate this long-term dedication and growth in their piano studies and the college application?
Well, I think one of the interesting parts of the application is the activities section. And I'm talking about the Common Application in the United States, which services almost all of the universities. And there is a section on I'm sorry, on activities. And the activities ask you, you know, number of years involved and the number of hours per week that you spend on this activity, right? Because they're not looking for you to have all these little things that you do on and off, right? So I'm a dinosaur. When I applied to college, the universities were looking for, they came out and they said we want good grades, we want volunteer work, we want some sports, and they wanted, everybody ended up doing a lot of things, right? But what they realized is that they ended up with a fairly homogenous class, right? Because if we're all doing the same things, even though we might be doing different things in terms of volunteering, or you might play the piano and I might play soccer, there's a lot of sameness there. And so what the universities have done is they've kind of backed up now and they've said, okay, what we want are people who are just really deeply committed to something. And I hate the word, but passionate about something, right? Because the idea is, and for those of you who have ever brushed up against the consulting world, the idea is a spike. So they want somebody that comes in and says, I love biology. I love biology. And in fact, I love insects and I have been studying insects on my own. It's what I'm here to learn. I think this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. Right. And they're sharing a room now with somebody who is a dancer and has spent their whole life dancing. Right. And on the surface, they have nothing in common, but they're two deeply passionate people, right? Intellectually curious and passionate people. And so you get this effect where you take all these kind of, instead of these horizontal layers, you get these vertical spikes. And when you push that together, magic happens, right? There's a lot of just cross fertilization and the electricity crackles around and really cool things tend to happen. And so what they're looking for is depth and length of commitment, right? Because you can't just pop your head up and say, oh, I love biology and I've spent 1 hour a week for the last 3 months on it, right? That's not convincing. And so for your students, it's very important to show kind of engagement over time and progress over time, right? And one of the other important things I would say is it's very important that they continue that through their senior year. Okay, I see a lot of students who are like, you know what, I'm just going to shed activities senior year because I'm busy and I want to focus on my academics and my applications. And that is a big mistake. Why? Because you're really going in at that point and you're saying, even though this is kind of important to me, I'm not doing it anymore. So it shows something about commitment. It also shows something about your ability to balance an intense course load and extracurricular activities, which, surprise, college is even busier,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
And so there are a lot of indicators there where you can really show that long-term commitment and, importantly, progress within that commitment.
That's really good to know because this and leads well to the next question, is there are many of our senior students are leaving because they have other priorities or they have other,
Mhm.
they're busy with their college applications. But actually knowing that sticking to something for an extended length of time and showing also the engagement, whether it's voluntary work or whether working for a club,
Right.
or whether they're performing concerts, is really valuable. And I think it's definitely one of the tools that we can share with our students who a lot of them believe I need to prioritize this section of my life. Um, but one of the things here that we do at Oclef is that we inspire and we try to figure out ways to create more creative projects in an environment which helps them build their portfolio, so they can really stand out. So one of the things
Mhm.
our students have been working on, one student launched a video series of video game compositions that she arranged for piano and
Very
orchestra.
cool.
Another student published a children's book. It's about an otter. Then he created some
Mhm.
artwork using AI and he wrote music to accompany the book. Another one of our students created a benefit concert, right, for
Mhm.
Make a Wish, raised $4,000. Another one is running a music and medicine workshop for students that are nonverbal and autistic. So then, when in the writing section, right, for the application, how do we create this narrative around all of these applications so that can really catch the college's eye in your experience?
So that's a great question. And it brings me to something that I'm sure some of your teachers have heard of called a passion project. It's
Mm,
all the rage right now. There's very few things in the world I despise more than a passion project. It's artificial. Any admissions officer who's spent more than 5 minutes in their job can spot it a mile away. Okay. Now, I'm not taking away from the fact that students do some good work and they raise some money and things like that. But what happens is most times with a passion project, it's completely unrelated to anything else in their application. Okay. So when you look at, so let's take the example of the student that was exploring the intersection of kind of autism, right, through
mm,
music and medicine. Now, that could be particularly effective if that student, for example, was interested in biology, was on a pre-med track, had also done some internships over the summer on, autism, or done research with a professor, or, worked in a facility that was working with autistic children, and maybe they discovered, oh, hey, you know what? Like, music actually helps in some situations. So let's look at this and try and figure out a program to help them, right? That's much different than if they were interested in finance, for example, and this was just some like project that they did on the side for their application, right? So as an admissions professional, I can spot that a mile away. And so we don't want to blunt students from doing good things. We really want to do is kind of pull them back and say, listen, the best thing you can do is something that is related to what you truly love, right? Figure out how those pieces fit together, because there's always a way that these pieces fit together, and do that, right? Because you're not judged so much on what you do, it's how you do it and why you do it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think I think it's quite easy for a lot of people to jump the gun and create a portfolio um, that takes on many different subjects, or that's just interesting. But I think
Mhm.
the idea that you've talked about finding, I guess, finding ideas and projects that are not just a passion project, but that are interesting and relevant to the cause, so that everything ties together. Because it can be
Right.
quite difficult to, when you're creating this portfolio or the application, to draw together, excuse me, all the different skills that highlight and put you in the best
Yes.
position possible. Um, is this something then that should be discussed early on with your students, even from when they're in middle school, and you're preparing them for college to start thinking, or even, excuse, for perhaps the early years of high school, sitting down and speaking to your student. So, what are
Right.
you into? What are the subjects that interest you? And then building your curriculum around that. Is that something that you'd suggest for our teachers
I,
in the community?
I think it's very helpful. I mean, if you're trying to help them in the college admissions process, right? Like, think about that. I think it's very helpful to start early, right? Because we can't go back and
Right,
fix things.
right,
And so, and so we want to do it. There's a balance, right? We certainly don't want to do it sitting them down as freshmen and saying, bah, college is coming. Be terrified, my little minions, right?
right.
That's not the point. The point is more um, to give them the freedom. And the freedom in this case is often terrifying, but to say, look, there is no set path here. There is no algorithm. There are no rules. Okay. Let's help you figure out what you love about music, what brings you joy, and what brings you joy outside of the music room, and how do we figure out some intersectionality here,
Yes,
right? And how do we think about that in the broader context, not of what you want to do with the rest of your life, right? So I get a lot of heat on social media because I am apparently single-handedly responsible for destroying the youth of America, and making them decide at 16 what they want to do for the rest of their life. That's not the question. The question is, right, what do you want to study? What interests you intellectually? What are you intellectually curious about? And so if they can help get some guidance to weave those things together around music, they're going to be happier if they truly do love music, right?
yes,
So,
yes, absolutely. I notice as well that in your blogs you talk about this unique voice. And so when you're sitting with your child and you're helping them write this application to
mhm,
try and find their unique voice that highlights their experiences, because it can be quite tricky, and not to come across as superficial, but to find that authentic voice that really displays who John really is as a 17-year-old,
right.
who Samantha really is, and to be framed in such a way that the colleges can see you, my friend, are a good fit for our program. What are
Right.
some catchphrases or words that you would use with your own children to help them, to help open up their mind a little bit to their own unique voice?
It's a great question. And a lot of it is process over time, right? So I see a lot of students whose parents, for example, have, in a very well meaning way, taken care of everything for them their whole life.
Hmm,
And so when they get to this application process, they've never really had to make a decision
right.
on their own. They've never been faced with adversity and had to solve a problem. And so they have great grades, they've done all the right things, but there's no depth there, right? And I would much rather have that student who has worked at McDonald's every day after school for, several hours a day to either contribute to the family budget or earn their gas money so that they can drive around with their friends and do the other things that they want to do, right? So I think that a lot of this is creating opportunities for your children to learn about themselves, right? And then oftentimes it's very hard for parents. I'm a parent, so I include myself in this. A lot of times, the best thing you can do is also step away, right? Because in my experience, these young men and women, these young people are really smart and they have very clear ideas about what they want, how they see the world, right? But as soon as a parent is sitting breathing over their shoulder, they start to write what they think the parent expects. Okay. And I'm not directly answering your question. This is just 20 hard earned years of experience talking, right? And so, even with my own children who actually do kind of listen to me on admissions things, I have other people who I know and trust work with them. And then I watch that process from afar, right? Because a good essay should be something in many cases that a student is almost hesitant to show their parents, right?
That's
Not
interesting.
because it's bad, but because they're teenagers and no teenager wants their parent peering into their soul, right?
Yeah.
And so it should be it should be honest, right? There's no catchphrases. You want to I always joke, avoid alliteration always, avoid fancy big words and complex sentence structures, right? This is a student sitting down and saying, look, this is who I am, right? And understanding too that they're not going to be the right fit for every school. No matter how badly you want to go to a school, sometimes the school looks at you and says, you know what? You're just not a fit for what we're looking for right now,
Right, right.
right? Because the school is evaluating you, you're evaluating the school at the same time. And a lot of times these students get very caught up, or parents more than students get caught up in perceived brand value and name and things that they can talk about with their friends. When really the students need to be very honest about themselves with what they want. How do they want to learn? Where do they want to learn? What do they want to learn?
Mm.
And that then helps them determine that overall strategy. And that overall strategy is what they're trying to communicate then in these essays.
And the big thing that I'm taking away from this is number one, it's never too early to start talking to a child about what they think, what they like, how they
Mhm.
operate, so that as they grow, they go to middle school, they go to high school, they have a rhythm with how they talk and how they communicate. And it's not
Right.
difficult to create a household that is open to discussion and open to critical thinking. And we can be so busy these days, believing that this is the one way to raise the child, when really actually just stepping back, as you said, is a very powerful tool. And so thank you for sharing that. We'll
Yeah.
continue practicing that. It's not easy.
I
I
was going to
feel
say, I'm not, I haven't got it perfect either. So
no.
we're doing the
Well,
best that we can.
I tell you what, Thomas. Let's go ahead and we'll open up the floor to some of our other parents that are here. Um,
Sounds great.
but before we do that, everybody, I've just got a question here from a couple of students. This is from a young lady called Nikita, and her question is: in a holistic admissions process, for those not applying for music, are music portfolios viewed strictly for their quality of technique, artistry, or a mix of both?
That's a great question, Nikita. And I think so. First of all, we want to be smart about whether or not we're even submitting a music portfolio.
Mm,
Okay. So a lot of the feedback that I hear from students and families is this isn't fair, right? I'm supposed to condense my entire life into one 650 word essay and then maybe a couple shorter supplement essays, right? That's not fair.
Case on the back of my phone, so it's like sticky.
And they're right, it's not fair, but that also drives clarity, right? It's like the old joke, I would have written you a shorter letter, but I didn't have the time.
right.
And it's very hard to be thoughtful and strategic and condense everything down. And so, as you're putting together this music portfolio, I think you really need to think to yourself, how, right, does this add to my application? And if so, how? Right? Because if you're just adding it for the sake of adding it, you have to keep in mind that when admissions officers evaluate applications, they're not looking at all your accomplishments and achievements and everything else, but they're also looking at your judgment.
Right.
Do you have good judgment? Do you have your mom and dad call every single alum that they know from the school and have them send letters of recommendation in, right? Do you ignore the questions and just talk about what you want to talk about? Do you submit a music portfolio even though you specifically are told you don't need to, right? That shows you that, okay, this is somebody who does not pay attention and who does not follow rules. And yes, we love creative people who break rules and think differently and everything else. But in an application process, when a school says, this, Lightroom area is only for people whose majors require submission, and you just do it anyway, that's not good. So I think it's very important to be thoughtful about that. But then I think if you are submitting one and you feel like it does fit into the broader strategy of your application, think about the pieces that you're choosing, because it's evaluated on a lot of things, on creativity, on artistry, on technique. You're being evaluated by the professionals in the music department. And so, I would say select unless you're really focused on one particular area, select a nice representative collection of pieces that showcase your personality and reinforce the message that you're saying in the essays.
That's really good to know. It's once again, it comes back to the relevance
Mm-hmm.
and how it actually supports, especially for those, as we know, many of these young people may not study music as a major, but they're trying very, very hard to create that portfolio that really supports their cause and who they are.
Exactly.
Because I'm sure it could also harm. It could also harm the application.
Yeah.
And so it's a fine line to walk. But thank you for that. Well, ladies and
Of
gentlemen,
course.
we'll open it up to you all. If you have a question, go ahead and just type your name in, and then we'll go ahead and have you share your thoughts with Thomas. If you have any burning questions for our topic today.
It's like you did such a good job, Ludwig, that nobody has any questions.
You're too kind. You're too kind.
And I would say, look, we've spoken here for what, 35 minutes, and I go into a lot more detail in my podcast and on social media. So if you have questions, certainly would welcome you, please, to listen. And you can find all of that at thomascaleel.com or Admittedly Podcast on Instagram and TikTok. So there's a lot more behind all these things that I try and explain in greater detail.
Right. Definitely.
Um,
Hi there,
if
Sheila.
nobody's going, I can go ahead.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Sheila. So I have a kid who is in elementary. I know my kid is not there yet,
Mhm.
but I thought I would join to get some information. Um, so when you say college applications are looking for like how long of a commitment that the person has in a specific area of interest in a field,
Mhm.
does it mean like high school years, like 2, 3 years, or like since they were a kid? What exactly are they looking for? Because I do have a kid who says she loves and enjoys music. That she
Mhm.
says that brings her joy, and she practices every day. She loves it. And the thing is, how can I direct her in a direction that could help her in the college application as well?
Sure. Well, thank you for the question, Sheila. And I
Mm.
think my favorite answer to any question when it comes to admissions is it depends. And I don't say that to be difficult. I say that because it truly does depend on the individual student, right? So um, we have some students that have been doing things since grade school, since elementary school, right? And
Mhm.
some of them
Yeah.
are truly world class and accomplished. Um, Other students will find that, maybe your child loves music, loves music, loves music, gets to, loves playing classical music, is playing piano, gets to high school and decides that they want to be in a band, right? They want to be in a punk rock band, whatever. And they change at that point, right? That's
Yeah.
fine. The important thing is we talk about that in the essays. We talk about that change. We talk about that transition, right? And that's all the admissions officer wants to know. They want to know, okay, well, how did you get here? What were the steps involved in that? And we see that a lot of times, even with non-music things, where when I have a student whose mother is a surgeon, and so their whole life they've grown up thinking, I want to be a surgeon, I want to be a surgeon, I want to be a surgeon. They take bio, they don't do well. They take chem, they don't do well. They intern at the hospital, and it's just the worst thing they've ever done. Right now, they're saying, "Oh my gosh, I'm a sophomore or a junior, and I realize I hate this thing I thought I loved my whole life. I hate." And so they make that change into the thing that they think that they enjoy, and then they just talk about that in the application, and they say, "Look, this is what happened. I've changed. This is my focus." And so, yes, I have a shorter involvement in these new things, but it was all of these old things I've done for years and years and years that have gotten me here and enabled me to have this moment of realization. And there's nothing wrong with that either.
Okay. Okay,
So,
that's good. Yeah, so taking those steps have led me to realize that I might not like it as much as I want. So that's
right.
why it's helping me to explore these new things. That's great. That's great.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sheila. I have a question
We
from.
do have a quote. Oh, sorry. Go
Go
ahead.
ahead there, Thomas. Go ahead.
No, we had a question in the chat, but we were both saying the same thing at the same time. So I'll throw it to you, Ludwig.
Yeah. Okay. This is from Chia Lin. So she's heard that if recordings are not exceptional, we might not want to send them. How good do recordings have to be considered worthy? Ooh, interesting question. Chia, is this? Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just wondering, Chia, is this for if your student is applying for music as a major? Or is this part of their portfolio, but they're applying for a major outside of music?
I am talking more about non-music major people
Non-music major.
because their recordings are, I know how good you should be for the conservatories, but for the non-music major, for the music portfolios, I'm not quite sure. I heard different things. So thank you so much.
All right,
Of course. And I'm sorry. And that's a great question. And I think that it goes back to what Ludwig and I were speaking about earlier. There's an element of judgment in there, right? So self-awareness. If, let's say, you're just going to, it's like, hey, this is me sitting in front of a piano playing music, and it's not, as you said, exceptional, and they're not a music major, I'm not entirely sure how that advances their application, right? And it could actually detract from their application, where the admissions officer is just trying to think, okay, we get that you play the piano, you're not really internationally competitive, we didn't really need this. And so it's a judgment call, right? But let's say that they organized a benefit concert, or they got invited to play at a big benefit concert, not because they were great, but they had a great personality, and it was fun. And, it was just like really amazing thing that they did and a lot of fun, or they were on television and they include that in the application and they've talked about it in the essays. Then it's kind of fun and cool to include that in the application. So there's a lot of judgment that goes in there.
Thank you so much. I know what you mean.
Okay, good. Thank you.
And we have a question here from Julian. Some of the students' examples that mentioned earlier, for example, the music autism workshop, Capstone project, they are a biology student and they have done all those internships at hospitals and worked with special needs students. How much should they be leaning into that spike in their essays, recommendations, and smaller projects? And would more be better than creating more of a balanced look?
That's a great question, Julian. And I think that when I say leaning into a spike, I don't mean to the exclusion of everything else. So it's fine to say, I'm really passionate about biology and I'm doing all this volunteering, capstone and project, and it takes up 90% of my time, but I allocate half of my remaining 10% of my time to piano, because piano is where I go to escape, where I go to think, where I go to kind of, meditate almost, right? So you can blend them both. They don't need to be even, and it doesn't need to be, the piano doesn't need to even be at this super high level, right? It can be at a good level, or it can even just be, hey, listen, this is something I do because I'm intellectually curious about it and I enjoy it, right? Like cooking or traveling or whatever it is, or knitting or whatever it is that you do that helps you achieve balance in your life.
Thanks so much for that, Thomas.
Sure.
One more thing that I wanted to just to share, especially with the parents that are listening. When they're sitting down and they're working with their students, encouraging them to continue studying piano, and explaining to them the benefits of actually taking these achievements into university. How would we pitch it to the students? Because we really do want them to continue this piano study. We know that it's good for them, and it's a lifelong journey.
Mm-hmm.
And they are very busy and they are very stressed. And so, is there a way that we would speak to these students to continue having them to understand actually there is a great benefit not only for your own enjoyment, but for your future studies in other subjects?
That's that's a pretty tricky conversation, quite frankly, especially when you're dealing with teenagers.
Right.
And I don't say that in any kind of negative or pejorative sense, right? I mean, they're very overwhelmed. They're trying to keep a lot of things in the air, and long-term strategic thought is not their forte, right? Brains aren't even developed to that point yet. So I think, though, the ones that you see do care about their educational path, are looking at highly selective schools, talk to them, send them to look at my stuff, talk to them about this, and just make clear that, look, this is not a point to point race. This is something that is going to last for a very long time. And something like piano should, if you're doing it right, help you on a lot of all the different metrics that we talked about today. I don't have anything particularly insightful here because I've got two teenagers and I'm still trying to figure out how to get them to listen all the time. So if anybody has any ideas, please drop them in the chat.
Thanks for that. All right, well, we have two more questions.
Yep.
For a non-music major student, I heard that other instruments are better than piano, since piano always is too much of an individual thing, not a teamwork, and it's hard to get outstanding for many reasons.
It's the teamwork. Instruments are saying, I wish I had a venue to prove myself as a soloist. And then the individual students are saying, I wish I had a venue to show myself in teamwork. Lean into what it is you love, right? The analogy with sports is like fencing or singles tennis versus rugby or soccer, for example, right? They're just different sports, different people, different attitudes and aptitudes. So lean into what you have. There are definitely ways for you to play the piano in a teamwork environment. And so if that's something that you crave, go do that. If you are a really just deeply intellectual person that likes the solitude of piano, there's nothing wrong with that, right? Don't try and force yourself into a modality that is not authentically you. And I realize how California I sound saying that, but it just won't resonate. You won't be successful at it. So
Thanks for that, Thomas. And our
Yep.
final question for our show, this is from Miss Anne. You mentioned that what colleges are looking for can change year to year. How do parents or students get a sense of what their preferred colleges are looking for?
That's a great question. And my answer to that is don't, because literally the criteria that the universities are looking for actually changes in the admissions process, right? Because when you start an application cycle, you don't know what kind of applicants you're going to get. You have an idea of what you want generally the class to represent, but if I want more oboists in my class and I only get 2 oboists applying, well, I can't do very much about that, right? And so I have to shift my priorities kind of midstream. So when you try and aim at what the admissions committee wants, it's a losing battle. It's much better to just kind of, and I know this is counterintuitive, it's much better to stand tall with, this is who I am, this is what I want to do, this is what I like, and this is what I'm showing to this school. And that's why we apply to a portfolio of schools, right? Because that won't resonate with every school. But I guarantee you, and as admissions officer, it's very, very clear when you read a file, the student who is trying to figure out what we want and speak to it. I can't quantify that. It's hard to give examples, but when you're reading this file, you just say, yeah, there's no sense of this person, and things don't always make sense. And it's very clear they're trying to find like, what's the easiest way into the school? And that's a recipe for failure. So don't try and figure out what the schools want. Try and figure out who your student is and what they want, and then communicate that in the application.
Well said. Thomas, before we end, could you please share or at least type into the chat to everybody your blog posts, your podcast,
Sure.
so that if anybody has further questions or would like things clarified, Thomas has wonderful resources that he available for all of us to use, even just to share with your own students as they try and navigate their way through this ordeal.
Mr.
No,
Ludwig, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I had a question for Mr. Ludwig. Would you be hosting more of these sessions in the coming months and years? So, and also a little more convenient for the students themselves to hear this. Probably, I think, coming from parents, the teenagers might not take all of it in the right spirit. So, probably coming from Thomas would be more helpful for them.
Of course, of course. Well, yeah, definitely. To answer your first question, there will be more, because this is an important topic for all of us, including myself. I have a young child, and I'm constantly just trying to figure out the best way to position him so that one day when I'm not around, he's able to figure out how to navigate, find his tribe, find his people. And so, of course, and we'll do our best to find those like Thomas who are around to share their wisdom and their understanding and the empathy with all of us. But yeah, Raghu, we'll definitely be working toward that.
Thank you.
And obviously, if there is demand, we can do another one, or if not, you can find somebody even better to do one at a time when the students can participate. That would be great.
Oh no, absolutely, Thomas. But thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your understanding. Thank you for your empathy, and thank you for sharing this journey with us, because we do have many questions, but at least for our piano teachers out there who want to continue supporting each other and their students and figuring out a way that they can take all of their studies into college, or at least help benefit them. This has been super valuable, and we'll make sure that we pop onto your blog and your website.
Great.
And no doubt be reaching out to you again very soon.
It's been a pleasure, and I'm actually hosting a free on October 6th, a free workshop on essays, because it's something a lot of people are struggling with. So for those of you who have children in that age, or if you're just curious, we'll put that information and sign up on the website. So please, attend. It's completely free and might be interesting. So
excellent.
Great.
Everybody, family, friends.
Thank you, everybody. Absolutely a pleasure.
Take care.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful rest of your day.